I think this. I know there's been a lot said. Did Kenny not handle the situation at the end of the year when he was healthy enough to play and they stuck with Mason Rudolph? Did he not handle that the right way? Yes, he did not, especially initially. I think he got better after that, but initially he did not handle that well. He wanted to be the starter. Was he promised that he would be the starter as soon as the season ended? He was. When that changed a couple of days ago, he put in a trade request. They honored it. They didn't trade Kenny Pickett because he asked them to. They traded Kenny Pickett because what they found out through 25 games, Kenny Pickett isn't good enough to lead a team in the NFL that has aspirations of winning a championship.
You know what's weird? The thing that came to my mind was another trade of a former first-round pick from another team here in town. Now, granted, this other guy was drafted a lot higher, but I think back to when Garrett Cole was traded from the Pirates. He came off the worst season of his career. But there were also some times where Garrett Cole was just not handling the failure around him very well. He was not handling his performance very well. But it also doesn't negate the fact that maybe the Pirates didn't do as well by him, in addition to him not handling the situation well. I feel the exact same way about this. I think Kenny Pickett not handling the situation well also does not negate the fact that the Steelers might not have handled this situation well. It might have been that way on both ends, and the best thing to do is maybe just cleanse the palate, just like clean the slate and start all over again.
You know, I think there are some parallels. I will say this, and having been close to that situation, Garrett Cole was never going to sign a long-term deal with the Pirates.
Also true.
Whether his agent wasn't going to allow it, and he didn't want to. And the other thing that I think it is different is that Garrett Cole had Lamar Jackson physical tools, whereas Kenny Pickett has like Greg Maddux physical tools. Like he can be accurate, but he doesn't have overpowering stuff. There's nothing about him you're like, ooh. Whereas with Garrett Cole, you found that. But I get what you're saying from a mental standpoint, and that they didn't have the pieces. I mean, he had Matt Canada as his offensive coordinator, and I think many times
you see where I'm
Kenny
going
was
with
told,
this.
right. I think many times Kenny was told, "Don't lose this game."
Right.
Like, so he couldn't play as aggressive as. I mean, look at how free. It's preseason, but look at how free he was in the preseason when there was no worry about making a mistake. Look at how he was at the end of games when they had no choice but to allow him to try to take chances. He had some success in his rookie season. What it turned out is over the 25 games that they watched him, the Steelers came to the point where they realized we need somebody else. It starts with Russell Wilson, and then how this year goes determines whether they then move on to somebody else or they draft somebody or however that plays out.
Yeah, the two situations, and that's really what I'm looking at here, that the two situations I laid out, they were both the same thing. It's like, look, we're not going to get the end result that we want. Neither guy is really happy, and we're not putting enough around them to help them succeed. So let's let them move on and start all over. And that felt like what this was. I know a lot of people on one side of it are going to say the Steelers failed Kenny Pickett. I know a lot of people on the other side are going to say, well, Kenny Pickett failed the Steelers. I don't mind saying both are true.
And Kenny's going to be a free agent here soon because
there's also that.
Unless Hurts goes down and Kenny has a remarkable season with all the talent around Philadelphia and proves that he can do it, they're not going to pick up his option. So he'll have one more year and then he'll be a free agent and be able to go wherever he wants. I don't wish him ill.
Me neither.
I don't look down at anything he did at Pitt now because he failed with the Steelers. He just wasn't good enough here. Whether some of that was the system, the coordinator, the talent around him, the play calling, but I think most of it, and I'm not saying this is me, but the Steelers showed they believe most of it was on him.
412-575-2600. We want to hear what you have to say. And judging from the phone lines, a lot of you want to talk about this, so we will take a break, and we'll talk more about it when we come back. Stick around. Time for our GMC Sierra tweet of the night. Comes from Ian Rappaport from NFL Network, NFL.com. This is the full compensation from the Kenny Pickett trade to Philadelphia Eagles. Get Kenny Pickett and the Steelers' original fourth-round pick, the 120th overall in 2024. The Steelers, in return, get the Eagles' third-round compensatory pick, 98th overall, and also their two highest seventh-round picks for next year's draft. Jeff Hathorn, 93.7 The Fan. He's live over in the 93.7 The Fan studio. Jeff, looking at the nuts and bolts, and we talked about this, and you mentioned how, it might have been surprising because Kenny Pickett might not have had much trade value. There was a lot of comparisons looking at the trade with Sam Howell from Washington to Seattle, kind of a similar return. Really similar situations. Two guys in that same draft. Both really didn't get the most out of their situations with their previous teams, so now they're moving on and their teams got some compensation. The one part of this trade that I did like, the 98th overall pick coming back for their 4th round pick at 120 now gives the Steelers 4 picks in the top 100. That's the one part I did like.
Yeah, I mean, I like that swap. I mean, let me be completely transparent. When you cover the draft, Josh, both of us do this, you don't want to see more 7th-round picks.
Yep.
You want to be done with the draft. You don't want to see them adding 7th-round picks.
Yeah, they just got rid of them.
Right. Like, I saw that. I'm like, yes, no 7th-rounder. But in all seriousness, listen, they were able to get something for him. They felt like he wasn't going to be their guy. This tells you that they weren't going to pick up the option on him anyhow, and that they're going to move on to somebody else. That they screwed up. They shouldn't have picked Kenny, the 20th pick overall 2 years ago.
Let's keep it on the phone lines here. Matt and Butler, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, Jeff, you just nailed it. How do you make such a mistake that you draft this guy 20th overall, and now you're basically trading him for little to nothing? That's number one. Number two is, I get that each maybe mishandled the situation, but Kenny Pickett also lost with the favor of his teammates. People were speaking out against him. So in the end, in the words of Buddy Ryan, trade him for a 6-pack. Doesn't even need to be cold.
Oh, man. Good
Josh,
call there by
do you know
Matt.
who the player was? Do you know who that player was that he spoke of?
Oh, I should know this.
Ernest Jackson.
I knew that.
And he came here and I think rushed for 1,000 yards.
I actually remembered that one. Just a little bit slow.
But listen, it was a bad pick.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I at least will say that they're doing. They're not going to drag it out another year. They've just gotten to the realization. Maybe it was sped up because Kenny wanted out, and they just decided, like, let's just cut this because everyone's going to. I mean, you should see the defensive players that were, like, pumped about Russ.
Yep.
It's not like there would have been any type of competition. So I think it's just best for everybody. And as for the end of last year, I don't even know it was much that they didn't like Kenny personally, but they saw Mason win. So you go with the guy that's winning.
There was a guy on offense who particularly lobbied for Mason Rudolph to get the job, and he got traded out right before Kenny Pickett did, in Deontay Johnson. So it wasn't
Wouldn't have been funny if they traded Kenny to Carolina. Oh
man, that would have really been like the ultimate just Siberian move there. But to your point, I read this in the book a little while ago, and basically the premise was, if you're going to make a mistake, the best thing you do if you make a mistake is to admit that you messed up as quickly as possible so you can move past it and move on to making other mistakes. And this feels like this is what Omar Khan's doing. And it's not the first time he's done it. It looks like, and it's not even that it looks like, I think it just is. Omar Khan's approach is way different than Kevin Colbert. If he makes a mistake, he's not going to wait around and linger and wait for the right opportunity or the right window. He's going to try to move it out now and try to get the best and make the best out of that bad situation and move past it. And I think that's the best way to approach this situation. Brandon in Penn Hills, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, gentlemen. I wanted to tell you that I'm very excited for the changes that are happening with the Steelers. This is the most excited I've been in a long time, but I want to give Kenny Pickett his due. He ended his Steelers career with a winning season. He only had one full regular season game without Matt Canada to prove himself, and then he never had a chance again. I wish him the best, unless he's facing the Steelers, which he can lose. But otherwise, I wish the best of luck for him wherever he goes.
Hard to argue with that one. 14-10 record overall in games that Kenny Pickett, or I think it's maybe 14-11 games in games that Kenny Pickett started. And Jeff, I've heard this a lot. There's the whole, he had Matt Canada thing. I'm going to borrow a phrase from Patrick Damp, a member of our web team who writes the Penguins Perspectives column on KDKA.com. And now, granted, a lot of times he talks about the Penguins, but I'm going to take this and parse it and take out the goaltender and use your quarterback. Pat always says, you know, your goaltender's allowed to make a save despite what's happening around him. Your quarterback's allowed to make throws despite what's happening around him. We could keep throwing he got stuck with Matt Canada thing and they brought him back for an extra year, but Jeff, you and I both know there were plays that were there to be made and he just didn't make them.
Yeah.
He's allowed to make a play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you did see, I mean, in that Cincinnati game, the first one where Canada was gone, I think Kenny threw for 278. Freiermuth had his first and only 100-yard game. I mean, there were things to be excited about with that offense. And Kenny did play well in that game. But ultimately, they decided over the span of the 25 games, he just wasn't good enough. And again, this year is all about finding a starting quarterback. That's something I've been saying for a while, and I'm sure they believe that too. They've decided that Kenny's not the guy. Don't drag it out another year. Move on and try to find the next one. Who's going to be that guy? Maybe it'll be Russ short term, and then you find somebody that can either learn under Russ, or when Russ is gone, you bring somebody else in, and they can hopefully be that one to take it to the next level, because the AFC is not getting any easier, and especially within your own division. And you better have a quarterback that can compete. Now they feel like, and if you look at the stats from last year, they've got a quarterback that they can compete with.
You're foreshadowing, Jeff, and I love it, because we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about who could be next. Got a good question we want to get to on Twitter. We'll do that when we come back. Stick around.